The royal feeding chamber of the Vorath Empire was, by any galactic standard, the most expensive room in the known universe. The walls were made of harvested moonstone from the third ring of Polaris. The floors were polished with the tears of 17 different species, which, yes, sounds dramatic, but the Vorath were nothing if not committed to their aesthetic. Chandeliers of living bioluminescent organisms hung from the ceiling, pulsing softly in colors that did not have names in most languages. The food itself, arranged in towering sculptures of edible art, represented the culinary genius of 6 planetary systems. And in the middle of all of it, Princess Yeva sat with her 4 arms crossed, her silver eyes half closed, and her jaw locked shut like a vault. "She has not eaten in 9 cycles," General Dorak whispered to head attendant Suva, both of them standing at the far edge of the chamber, both of them sweating in the way that species sweat when they are genuinely terrified. 9 cycles. "The Queen will dissolve us." "She will not dissolve us," Suva whispered back, though her 3 fingers were shaking around her data tablet. "She will simply have us reassigned to the waste processing colony on Muir 6, and then we will dissolve ourselves." This was, unfortunately, accurate. Princess Yeva, heir to the Vorath throne, commander of future fleets, diplomatic bridge between 17 allied species, was 14 years old in human equivalent years, and she had decided, with absolute certainty, that she was done eating. Not because she was unwell. Not because the food was poisonous. But because she had recently discovered a concept from a small, frankly ridiculous planet called Earth, and that concept was a hunger strike. She read about it in a human cultural archive, Suva muttered, pinching the bridge of her snout. Some ancient human named Gandhi. Now she thinks she is making a political statement. What political statement? Dorak blinked all 4 of his eyes at once. That she wants to attend the Interplanetary Youth Summit on Theros Station instead of her arranged diplomatic tea with the Grethian ambassadors. Dorak stared at the princess. The princess stared at the wall. A food sculptor nearby quietly rearranged a tower of shimmer fruit and pretended not to exist. 9 cycles, Dorak repeated slowly. Over a tea party. She is 14, Suva said, as if that explained everything, because it did. They had tried everything. The royal chef, a being who had cooked for 3 emperors and 1 god-adjacent entity, had personally prepared 47 dishes. Yeva had looked at each one with the expression of someone being mildly insulted. The queen's own physician had arrived, examined her, confirmed she was physically fine, and left the room at a speed that suggested he had somewhere very important to be that was very far away. 3 cultural negotiators had been brought in. 1 had left crying. The second had attempted to reason with her using logic charts. Yeva had pointed out 6 errors in his logic. The third had simply sat across from her for 2 hours in silence and then stood up and walked out without a word, his dignity entirely intact, his spirit completely broken. And now, on the 9th cycle, with the queen's patience thinning like ice over hot water, head attendant Suva was doing something she would later describe as either the smartest or most embarrassing decision of her career. She was calling in the human. His name was Bram. He was 31 years old. He was employed by the Vorath Royal Station as a maintenance and sanitation worker, which was a dignified way of saying he cleaned floors. He had been posted here for 2 years as part of an Earth-Vorath diplomatic exchange program that nobody on either side had taken very seriously. He had a mop. He had a bucket. He had, at this particular moment, a half-eaten sandwich in his front pocket, because he had been on his lunch break when the emergency comm had reached him. He walked into the feeding chamber and stopped. He looked at the moonstone walls. He looked at the bioluminescent chandeliers. He looked at the 47 untouched dishes arranged like a museum exhibit. He looked at the princess, who looked back at him with the flat, unimpressed gaze of someone who had been staring at walls for 9 days and was bored enough to make eye contact with a janitor. Bram blinked. He looked at Suva. Suva gave him a look that said, "Fix this, or we all go to Muir 6. Bram reached into his pocket. He pulled out his sandwich. He unwrapped it. He took a bite. He chewed. He swallowed. He looked at the princess again. "You're the one on the hunger strike?" he asked, his mouth still slightly full. Yeva lifted her chin. "I am making a political statement." "About the tea party?" Her silver eyes narrowed. "The diplomatic engagement with the Grecian ambassadors is a performative ritual designed to suppress my autonomy as an emerging sovereign individual." Bram took another bite of his sandwich. "So. The tea party." The food sculptor in the corner made a sound like a suppressed laugh and quickly turned it into a cough. Yeva's forearms uncrossed. "Just slightly. Just enough to be noticeable." "You are the sanitation worker," she said. "Bram," he said. "Yeah. You are eating in my presence without permission. You want me to stop?" She looked at the sandwich. She looked at him. She looked at the sandwich again. And for the first time in 9 cycles, something shifted in her expression. Not much. Just a hairline crack in the magnificent wall of royal stubbornness. But Suva saw it. Dorak saw it. Even the food sculptor saw it and leaned forward about 2 centimeters. "What is that?" Yeva asked. "Egg and pepper sandwich," Bram said. "Made it this morning. It smells strange." "Yeah, the pepper's a bit much. I like it though." Yeva stared at him. He stared back, completely unbothered, chewing his sandwich in the most expensive room in the known universe with the air of someone sitting on a park bench on a Tuesday afternoon. And that was the thing about Bram that no cultural negotiator, no physician, no royal chef, and no logic chart-wielding diplomat had managed to bring into this room. He was not afraid of her. Not even a little. Every single person who had walked through that door had walked in with the weight of consequence pressing down on their shoulders. They had brought strategy. They had brought data. They had brought carefully rehearsed arguments and backup arguments and contingency plans for when those arguments failed. They had walked in performing the act of calm while quietly panicking underneath. Bram had walked in eating a sandwich. And Yeva, who had been performing her own act for 9 cycles, who had sat in this room with everyone treating her like a diplomatic incident rather than a 14-year-old girl who just wanted to go to a summit with other young people her age, was looking at this human janitor with an expression that was doing something very dangerous. It was getting curious. "Why did they send you?" she asked. Bram finished his sandwich. Folded the wrapper. Tucked it back in his pocket. "No idea," he said, which was technically a lie, but it landed like the truth, which is sometimes more useful. "I was on my lunch break. They cummed me. I came." He shrugged. "Why haven't you eaten?" "I told you." Political statement. "Right. But you're hungry." Yeva said nothing. "You've been in here 9 days, Bram said. You're not Gandhi. Gandhi had a whole empire to push against. You've got a tea party." He paused. "No offense." "Considerable offense," she said. "Sure," he said, entirely unbothered. "But you're still hungry." The room was very quiet. The chandeliers pulsed. The shimmer fruit sat in its tower, waiting. Suva held her breath so hard she was developing a headache. Yeva looked at Bram for a long moment. Then she looked at the 47 dishes. Then she looked back at him. "Sit down," she said. Suva exhaled. Dorak put his head in his hands in pure, overwhelming relief. The food sculptor nearly knocked over the shimmer fruit tower. And Bram, maintenance worker, sanitation engineer, and apparently the most effective diplomatic negotiator on the Voreth royal station, pulled up a chair and sat across from the princess of an empire. "So," he said. "Tell me about this summit." Nobody in the history of the Voreth Empire had ever eaten a meal with a janitor. That was not an exaggeration. That was a fact. Suva had checked the royal archives in a mild panic while Bram was pulling up his chair, and she could confirm, with complete certainty, that in 4,000 years of Vorith imperial history, no member of the royal bloodline had shared a table with someone whose primary job involved a mop. It was not even a rule that had been written down, because nobody had ever thought it needed to be written down. It was simply one of those things that was understood, the way gravity is understood, the way you do not need a sign to know that you should not walk into a sun. And yet, there was Bram Osei, sitting across from Princess Yeva, completely unbothered by the 4,000 years of tradition he was currently sitting on top of. The summit, Yeva began, straightening in her seat with the posture of someone who had been trained from birth to occupy space with intention, is the first interplanetary youth diplomatic forum on Theros Station. Representatives from 39 species. All under the age of 20 in their respective biological equivalents. It happens once every 12 years. She paused. The next one will occur when I am 26. I will no longer qualify. Bram nodded slowly. And they want you at a tea party instead. A performative engagement, she corrected. With people who are how old? The youngest Grecian ambassador is approximately 104 years old in standard cycles. Bram made a face. Okay, I get it. I was not asking for your permission to be frustrated, Yeva said, though the sharpness in her voice had softened somewhere around the edges, the way ice does not crack all at once but begins to lose its rigidity from the outside in. I know, he said. I'm just saying, I get it. You want to be in a room with people your age, talking about things that actually matter to you, and instead you're being handed a cup of tea and a schedule someone else made. He leaned back in his chair. That's a real thing to be upset about. Yeva looked at him. Not the flat, wall-staring look she had been distributing freely for 9 cycles. An actual look, with attention behind it. The negotiators told me my feelings were understandable, she said, but that duty supersedes personal preference. Sure, Bram said. They're not wrong, technically. But there's a difference between telling someone their feelings make sense and actually acting like those feelings are real. He picked up a small piece of shimmer fruit from the nearest dish, examined it, and popped it into his mouth without ceremony. His expression immediately shifted into something complicated. That is extremely good, actually. Yeva almost smiled. It was a small thing, barely a movement, but Suva, watching from the edge of the room, pressed her data tablet to her chest like she was trying to hold her own heart in place. It is shimmer fruit from the Pelari orchards, Yeva said. It is considered the finest fruit in the Empire. And you haven't eaten any of it in 9 days, Bram said. I was making a point. Did it work? Yeva was quiet for a moment. Her 4 arms rested in her lap, no longer crossed. Her silver eyes moved to the window, where the stars outside the station hung in their permanent, indifferent arrangement. My mother has not come, she said finally, and her voice, for just that single sentence, belonged to a 14-year-old girl rather than a princess. In 9 cycles. She has not come herself. She sends attendants. Physicians. Negotiators. She paused. She sent you. Bram was quiet too. He was not the kind of person who rushed to fill silence, which was, without him knowing it, exactly what the moment needed. She is the queen of 17 systems, Yeva continued, and the formality was coming back, layering itself over the rawness the way armor goes on after vulnerability. She does not have time to sit with a daughter who refuses to eat over a summit. Is that what she told you? She did not tell me anything. That is precisely the point. Bram looked at the shimmer fruit. He looked at the 47 dishes. He looked at the princess, who was looking at the stars with an expression that was not anger anymore, and had not been anger for quite some time, and had probably never been entirely anger to begin with. I'm going to say something, he said, and you can tell me if I'm completely off base. You frequently appear to be off base, Yeva said. Fair. But here it is. He leaned forward slightly. You stopped eating because you wanted her to walk through that door. The room did not make a sound. Even the bioluminescent chandeliers seemed to dim by a fraction, as if they too were holding their breath. Yeva did not answer. Which was, in its own way, the most complete answer possible. Bram nodded slowly. He did not press. He did not follow the silence with a speech or a strategy or a carefully constructed argument. He simply reached across the table, picked up a small dish of something that smelled warm and complicated, and slid it gently toward her. Eat something, he said. Not because I convinced you. Not because the negotiators wore you down. Just because you're hungry, and being hungry doesn't help anyone, including you. Yeva looked at the dish. She looked at him. You are very strange, she said. I've heard that. You are a sanitation worker who ate a sandwich in my presence, sat down without invitation, and told me that my hunger strike was not comparable to Gandhi's. I mean, it's not. It is somewhat comparable. Yeva. She picked up the dish. She ate. And the sound that came out of Suva was not professional, not dignified, and would never appear in any official record of the day's events, but it was absolutely, unmistakably, the sound of a person who had just avoided mere 6. What happened in the following hour was not something that made it into the imperial records either, because the imperial records were curated by people who understood what belonged in history and what belonged somewhere quieter. What happened was this: a princess and a janitor sat across from each other in the most expensive room in the known universe, and she told him about the summit, about the sessions she had read the abstracts for, about the speaker from the Dravani collective who was going to present on youth-led resource policy, and he listened, not because it was his job, but because she was interesting, and the thing she wanted mattered, and those two facts were sufficient reason. He told her about Earth. Not the version that appeared in galactic cultural archives, the dramatic version, full of wars and monuments and species-defining moments. The ordinary version. Traffic. Grocery stores. The specific misery of a broken vending machine when you are already having a bad day. She laughed once, a short, surprised sound she immediately tried to disguise as something else, and he pretended not to notice, which was the kindest thing he did all afternoon. 3 hours after Bram had walked into the feeding chamber with a half-eaten sandwich, Queen Mara of the Vorith Empire walked in. She was tall, in the way that stars are bright, not as a quality but as a fundamental condition of her existence. Her 4 arms were still. Her silver eyes, identical to her daughter's, swept the room and landed on the table where her daughter sat, eating shimmer fruit across from a human maintenance worker. The Queen looked at Bram. Bram looked at the Queen. He stood up, because that much protocol he knew. Your Majesty, he said. You are the sanitation worker, the Queen said. Bram, yes. She looked at her daughter. Yeva met her gaze, and for a moment the two of them held something between them that had nothing to do with empires or summits or diplomatic teas, something that was simply a mother and a daughter who had both been too proud and too afraid to walk through the door first. You ate, the Queen said. He did not negotiate me into it, Yeva said immediately. I want that noted. Noted, the Queen said. And then, quietly, she sat down at the table. Not at the head. Not at a distance. At the table. She folded her hands. She looked at her daughter. Tell me about the summit. Yeva blinked. Just once. Then she began to talk. Bram quietly picked up his mop from where he had left it by the door. He had, technically, still been on his shift when the comm reached him. He slipped out of the feeding chamber without announcement, without ceremony, without anyone officially noting that he had left. Suva caught him in the corridor. The Queen will want to thank you, she said. She's busy, Bram said. I've still got the East Corridor to finish. Suva stared at him. You resolved the 9th cycle royal crisis. I ate lunch and talked to a kid, he said, and he pushed his mop bucket down the hallway, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor, the sound echoing through the moonstone walls of an empire that was, in at least one small room, doing exactly what it needed to do. 3 weeks later, Princess Yeva attended the Interplanetary Youth Diplomatic Forum on Theros Station. She also attended the tea with the Grecian ambassadors. And on her desk, in the royal quarters of the Vorith Station, there was a small, hand-drawn map of Earth, with a note that said, "In case you ever want to hear about the vending machines." She had not thrown it away. Friends, if you are enjoying our videos and want to watch new and exciting sci-fi and HFY stories every day, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, make sure to turn on the bell icon so you never miss any of our latest uploads. Like the video and share it with your friends as well, so our community can continue to grow and bring you even more amazing content.